In Washington, a Pentagon spokesman says Moscow is reinforcing and resupplying its troops in the east of Ukraine.
We have seen some early indications, Bob, that they are, in fact, the Russians are, in fact, trying to resupply and reinforce their efforts in the Donbass. I think you guys have all seen imagery. I've seen it in some of your outlets of yet another convoy of vehicles that are heading south towards that town of Izium. We believe that these are the early stages of a reinforcement effort by the Russians in the Donbass. It does seem to be a mix of personnel carrying vehicles as well as armored vehicles and maybe some artillery, maybe some enabling capabilities. Not exactly clear, but this does seem to be an early effort by them to reinforce their efforts in the Donbass.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby there. Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the Washington-based military analyst Doug Brooks. He's the president emeritus of the International Stability Operations Association. I started by asking him whether he's detecting an increased Russian military buildup in eastern Ukraine.
Well, they're trying, but I think it's important to remember they used their best combat units in Kyiv in that attack, which failed. They lost a lot of people. My understanding of what we're hearing from sources is that it's a lot of conscripts now, which are the lowest of the low, that are being sent to the east. They're trying to move over some units from the Kyiv offensive over to the east. But from what we see, they're a mess right now, so they need to be rebuilt. I don't think there's any impending attack of any size that's going to take place there. I think we'll see more fighting in Mariupol, but in terms of a large-scale offensive, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon.
But I mean, you are, of course, a military strategist and a military analyst. Do you expect the Russian strategy to change as they try to refocus on that eastern region? Because I've heard it said that the Russians are trying to weary the Ukrainians down.
So May 9th is their victory in World War II day. It's an important day, and allegedly Putin wants to have something by May 9th that he can sort of declare victory, and so grabbing certain amounts of territory to give some continuity between by land between Crimea and the rest of the Donbass and the rest of Russia. There are various things that they're much smaller goals than they had originally, which was essentially regime change in Ukraine. But it'd be something that Putin could sort of declare victory and call it a day, hopefully.
And concerns being raised that Moscow is planning to use chemical weapons as things grow more toxic for them in Ukraine, or may in fact have started using chemical weapons. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And I wonder if there's any evidence to support those claims.
So there's been one report from Mariupol that a drone was distributing some sort of chemical, and that's possible. But from a tactical perspective, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, chemical weapons mean that all your people have to have gas masks and ABC suits and everything else. So I don't think that it's really likely. If they do use chemical weapons, it would really just be a sign of vindictiveness. I can't see any real tactical value in it.
Now, just moving on from that, we're hearing from Bellingcat that 150 FSB officers and one head of department have been fired in what's being called a sort of Stalinist purge. There are reports that at least one of them has been arrested over intelligence failings related to the war in Ukraine. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, apparently, and I guess, if you're an authoritarian and you surround yourselves with yes men, nobody's going to tell you, no, this is a really bad idea, or no, we can't do it. So I think Putin is fed up, and he is an authoritarian, so he has the ability to do this sort of thing. But yeah, it's not the way to fight a war, and you hope that the Ukrainians apparently are much more adept at making sure they have good people in the right places, and the information they get, good, bad, or ugly, gets through to the leadership. So Russia's trying to fix that on the fly, but I think they've already suffered a humiliating disaster. Whether they can salvage something out of it, I don't know. I think it's right now, this latest offensive in the east is not really materializing. So I don't see a whole lot coming out of this that's good for Russia.
Well, I mean, let's turn and talk about the Russian General Alexander Dvornikov. He's now been given apparently military oversight in Ukraine. He was running the Russian military operation in Syria. How might he change what's going on in Ukraine? How capable is he in your assessment?
Well, apparently they had one of the big issues they had with the Russian invasion is that they divided the command among a number of different generals, so there's no coordination, and that was part of the problem. So they're hoping by putting it under one person, they'll have more coordination. But I mean, fighting in Syria and fighting militia groups in Syria is a far cry from fighting literally a NATO-trained army with NATO weapons. So I don't know. It may help things. Maybe they'll improve the coordination, but I don't see that he's going to be able to change a whole lot, even if he is capable.
Now, you talked about NATO weapons. I mean, what about the issue of how fast Western military aid gets delivered to Ukraine and whether it matches the needs on the ground, specifically with regard to more advanced weapon systems that are required to counter the Russian offensive? I mean, how important is that?
It's very important, but the Pentagon briefing yesterday, they mentioned that it takes 6 days from the time the president says, let's send this weapon system to Ukraine to get it into the field, which is pretty remarkable. That's from the United States. Plus, you have all the other NATO countries along there, some with the Soviet-era weaponry that the Ukrainians are trained on that they're able to ship in. So I think that's real important. But one thing that I think gets overlooked way too much is the intelligence aspect. NATO has been flying these AWACS aircraft all along the borders of Ukraine without crossing the border. They're staying in international waters of the Black Sea. But they're feeding that information pretty clearly to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are using that to basically block any movement the Russians do, and also to be able to interdict their supply lines and everything else. And that's just intel. I mean, it's just telling people where the bad guys are, and I think that's been obviously. I think it's been going since the very beginning, and that's I think far more valuable than simple weapons.
Always very interesting getting your take on developments in Ukraine. Doug, thank you very much indeed. Doug Brooks is a military analyst, and he was talking to me there from Washington.